Okay.
Hmm? No, no, that's true. I mean, if you have like pictures, you can put but
No, he's getting I was choking.
all right, here we go. So we're behind. We got right to Christmas Day, right?
Yeah.
And did I mention the American crisis in here? I did not. I could see from that answer, no. So everybody write down the American crisis. So remember on Friday we talked about that they're going to attack on the day after Christmas. Who were the mercenaries? What were they? What did the Americans end up calling them? Yeah, the Hessians. Even though it's not really the correct pronunciation, hey, English speakers. And so they're going to probably be drinking. Washington is an all or nothing attack. This is the darkest, the lowest time. And the American Crisis was a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine, the same guy who wrote Common Sense. And in this, he laid out, well, he tried to say, it's still worth the fight. Despite defeat after defeat, we can still win in the end. Yes, this is a crisis, but we can keep going. So imagine it's sleeting, it's dark, they're about ready to jump on these whale boats and cross the very dangerous Delaware River. And they all know how dangerous it is. Remember, a third of them don't have shoes. Ah. And I don't know why I was looking, ooh, what pass? I saved it for later. That's right. And so Washington pulled out this pamphlet, The American Crisis. And the beginning has, I think, one of the greatest starts of a pamphlet, of a letter, of a bit of propaganda ever. It's so good. And read it to his shivering men who are all kind of lined up, and they know how dangerous it's going to be, and they don't want to go. And they're in rags or whatever they might have. And so, let me read this to you. And it's about this. So get comfortable. It's going to be a few days. But I think you'll enjoy it. I'm just going to read the first couple sentences, and they're great. I love the beginning. So think about it. The darkest time. And it is, these are the times that try men's souls. These are the times that try men's souls. What a great beginning. The summer soldier, the sunshine patriot, will in this crisis shrink from the service of his country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny like hell is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. Okay, that's all I'm going to read. But what's a summer soldier? What's a sunshine patriot? The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this time of crisis, shrink from the service of his country. Yeah.
You only fight when the other is.
When everything's going great, we'll fight. We're there when we're going to win. But when times get tough, they're the ones who desert. Now, what's that say then? What is that therefore Washington saying about those 1,000 huddled men in front of them? What are they? Yeah.
You're the people the good soldiers.
Yeah. You're the best. You're the best. And no matter how hard it is, you're the ones who stuck with the fight. You are the ones that showed true patriotism. And as awful as this is, it's worth it. We can win. And that worked. It got them on the boats. It might not have taken them to actually fight, but they got on the boat. They crossed. Patriot spies, or loyalist spies, tried to tell the Hessians. But the Hessians were all hungover and drunk. They were still sleeping it off. They couldn't wake anybody up. They could follow the path. They landed about a mile upriver. they could follow the march of the Continental forces by the bloody footprints. Because those without shoes, their feet just split apart. They fought though, and they took them totally by surprise. They came storming into Trenton. A few little groups of Hessians, trying to get their clothes on, came out of barns or whatever building they're trying to fight, but they were totally taken by surprise. Most were taken prisoner. A huge victory. Not in the fact that it's going to change the course of the war by this destroying the Hessian army. That's not the point. They won a battle. After defeat, humiliation, and defeat, they won a battle. And that would be huge. And then, please do the right map. So, then almost immediately, Washington did a very intelligent thing. He fled. He went south of Trenton and set up camp. The British came down. This is that little road I drew, but I'm going to show you that this is the West Point map for the military academy's atlas. Under a British general, very competent general named Cornwallis, kind of an awesome name, and they came down with 10,000 men to finish them off once and for all. How it's mapped. So it's going to be into the next year that Cornwallis arrives. Cornwallis arrives at Trenton on the 1st, and the 2nd he's ready to attack. Washington's sitting down here. The night of the 2nd, Washington has all his men light campfires. Remember this? And then do what? He left. And this is where Washington showed his brilliance. He knew from his time in fighting, but also how to lead people. He made mistakes all the time and would never admit it. Here, instead of fleeing across, he attacked the rear guard of Princeton and surprised them in the morning. So while Cornwallis is attacking an empty camp, he's attacking Princeton. And that would be the Battle of Princeton on January 3rd. So Trenton and Princeton go hand in hand. This was a really confusing battle. The exhausted Continentals attacked, their lines got all messed up. In fact, the attack began to fail. But just as his men were wavering, Washington rode to the front, and here's trying to show Washington in the front, waving his sword, screaming at the men to rally. A musket ball went through his hat and another one under his shoulder, under his armpit, and didn't hit him. You can imagine how Washington's starting to think, I must be charmed. You think about necessity and all those other things, mistakes he made, and somehow he came out. The men rallied and beat the exhausted British back. And the British fled, and Washington was chasing them, basically saying what they do on a fox hunt. Come on, boys, the fox is on the run. And they chased him. A great victory. Once again, not a victory that's going to change the course of the war on its own. This is just a tiny little action. But Trenton and Princeton would show Washington's leadership. I should say one more thing. Then what did Washington do after that? Ran away again. Got the heck out. They spent a miserable winter, the remnants of his forces in upstate New Jersey, a place called Morristown. But he won. And that's why these are so important. It proved to the patriots, it proved to those who are wavering, we can win a battle. Remember, Washington doesn't need to win every battle. He just needs to do what? Just survive. And this shows we're in the fight. We're in the fight. So yeah, you took New York. Yeah, of course. That's huge. The British never really understood what a big deal this was. But Washington is starting to realize, slowly but surely, I survive, we win. It's that main battle, the main army. If they're still fighting, the Continental Army, whether Washington's still fighting, the Patriots still have a chance. So, huge victories. And that's why 1851, this would be such a symbol for the American independence, the Declaration of Independence. I've mentioned this painting once before. This was to encourage Germans to finish unification after the failed attempt in 1848 to unify the country. So I find that just kind of fascinating, but also shows the importance of the American Revolution. And that's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I could have used a better picture, but I wanted to use the picture I took, and these two random people looking at it. And it's just interesting to me because it shows the importance of the Declaration, shows the importance of the American Revolution as this symbol of nationalism for other places too. And it's a neat painting. And let me show you one more picture. And this was done in the 1850s in the United States. They made these lithographs, they'd watercolor them, people would buy these. They could mass produce them, beginning of the Industrial Revolution, so people could buy them cheap. Here's the Battle of Princeton. And I just love this one because look at Washington's face. Look at that head. So they got the famous picture of Washington from 1893 and stuck it on that. It just looks out of place, creepy, and heads shouldn't turn that way. So all of a sudden you have this, yeah, he looks like he was only 20 years older than what he actually is, and very white, like pale white. It's from this painting. His official portrait when he was president 20 years afterwards. I just find that amusing. But this is going to be done a lot. So Washington, there's almost going to be like this cult and all these myths about Washington in the 1820s, 1830s. Have you ever heard this story about Washington? He would never tell a lie. And he cut down a cherry tree. And his dad asked him, and he said, I cannot tell a lie. I cannot tell. And this became this myth. It was done by this writer named Parson Means, who would write all these nationalist myths about he threw a silver dollar across the Potomac and all this kind of stuff. There were no silver dollars yet, but he threw it anyways. So that whole cherry tree thing, of course it's not true. But look at this painting of it. Look at Washington. That's supposed to be Parson Means. Like telling the story. So I close it. Look at Washington. He's supposed to be a little kid. He's an homunculus. You know what a homunculus is? Medieval art. They would draw children with adult faces. And they're really creepy. Really creepy. I just find that hilarious. So, let's get to 1777. So the British strategy now, all right, Trenton and Princeton wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, they were literally like, okay, once summer, especially July and August, when the sun is out and we want to worry about muddy marches on no roads, or for that matter, wet powder, they're going to attack. And their plan is a pretty basic one. Take all of New York. Take New York. So General Howe would march up the Hudson towards Albany. Albany is really the only city of any size, only a couple thousand, but at least has some kind of a town. And then from Canada, General Jonathan Burgoyne, Gentleman Johnny Burgoyne, would march down Lake Champlain past Ticonderoga. And this would take the Hudson. And on the map, it looked like a really good plan. That would split New England permanently off from the rest of the colonies. They would hold the rest of the colonies and then finish New England in detail. Now, the problem is they didn't have near enough men to hold all this. It's more symbolic. So the plan is flawed. There's going to be another plan to attack this way. But this is the one we care about, this class. So Howe, he and his brother, Admiral Howe, General Howe, are sitting in New York, and they got this plan, so it's sent over from London. How he's going to meet Burgoyne. He looked at the plan. He knows the area. He knows, frankly, it won't do that much good, as he saw. We don't have enough men to hold everywhere. And the Continental Congress is down here in Philadelphia. They're right there. No, I'm not going to do it. Howe and his brother decided we're going to disobey orders and attack Philadelphia. And that's what they did. Howe went to Philadelphia. That's where the Continental Congress was. He has the Royal Navy. They can go anywhere they want it. So that's what they're going to do. No, they did not bother to tell anybody. So Burgoyne is marching. And also they built kind of a makeshift fleet down to Lake Champlain. And there we go. So the Royal Navy, under Admiral Howe, goes here to the Delaware, land right here, and march overland to Philadelphia. Washington, who's here, meets him. Once again, Washington only has about 1,500 total troops that are kind of trained. He picks up militia, but he's way outnumbered. But Washington decides to stop him. There's a place right here, where's my map? Right here called Brandywine, and he fails. Philadelphia falls. The first big fight called Brandywine outside of Philadelphia, Washington once again left his flanks in the air. This is a watercolor of supposedly British soldiers after the battle. I just figured why not. Philadelphia fell. And to Howe's point of view, their capital fell. The war is over. They're going to sue for peace. All those wars for empire in the 18th century were relatively small wars. You take the capital and do a peace treaty. No, not only that, there'd be another battle in October at Germantown. And once again, the Continental Army lost, but fought better. And Washington was able to retreat in good order, meaning they're still in the fight. And what about the Continental Congress? They just fled. They went to the interior, to a town right about here called York, and just kept meeting. They don't need victories. They just need to survive. They could go anywhere they want with the Royal Navy, the British, but they can't win until they destroy Washington's army. So Philadelphia, great, we took it. They hold it for about a year. What about up here? What about at Lake Champlain? There was another big action by Arnold here the previous year for Lake Champlain. So the British had to start out here and are advancing here. August, they're about here. And that's where Burgoyne realizes, once he got past Ticonderoga, there's no General Howe. And he's stuck. If he retreats, he has barely enough time to get back to Quebec before winter. But if he stays, he's got to get to Albany. He's got to get to Albany because that's the only place for shelter. Every continental force, Arnold's militia, any militia, fighters, a few soldiers from around here are going to try to stop him right there. And it's going to lead to a series of 3 battles that we lump together as Saratoga. Saratoga. All in October 1777. Horatio Gates was a former British officer who retired, and he would become the commander of this hodgepodge of soldiers. Burgoyne has got to break through. So basically, Burgoyne's going this way. Gates meets him right here at a series of heights called Bemis Heights. So here, and he's got to get through. Albany's down here. Burgoyne knows, I have to get to Albany. His supply situation is horrible. He assumed he'd meet Howe and be resupplied up the Hudson. No, he's in real trouble. So both sides have about 10,000 men, but Burgoyne's men are trained, but they're dug in on these heights. 2 different times, Burgoyne tried to attack the Continental Army Hill. The 3rd time would be the crucial fight on Bemis Heights. The 3rd time. And at Saratoga, the British almost broke through. After I put arrows up short, they're doing well. They almost broke through. The Continental lines began to collapse. The British were advancing uphill, so think about fighting all day, and finally, late afternoon, Continental, the militia began to run. The army began to run. Yes.
I was looking for yardsticks. I wasn't going to bug you. I'm sorry, guys.
For yardsticks, I have 1 yardstick.
That will work. That's all I need.
I need that back. That's a really important yardstick.
I'll get this one.
You're the math teacher. You're supposed to have yardsticks. Where was I? Oh! The second in command was Benedict Arnold. And Arnold thought Gates was an idiot. And Gates thought Arnold was insubordinate. And after the second battle, Arnold was put under tent arrest. They didn't have a house. He was in a tent. He was going to court-martial Arnold for disobeying orders. So Arnold's sitting in this tent, and he could see outside or peeking underneath, men begin to run away. The line was collapsing. The battle was being lost, and his guard took off too. He ran out of his tent. A horse, a riderless horse was going by, and he grabbed the reins and kind of swung on. And that's a picture of him as he wheeled the horse and started riding towards the men, screaming every obscenity in the great book of obscenities of 1777, yelling them all, and yelling at the men to rally. And he grabbed, okay, it's either a sword or somehow got a sword or a rifle, but probably a sword, and hitting the flat edge of the sword and was hitting people. Get back in line. Quit running. Get back in the line. Screaming at them. And he rallied little pockets of men. Now here's a watercolor kind of showing that. They didn't have uniforms, but they show them in blue, then they're continental. And the exhausted British ran up against these little pockets and they just screamed over. They've been fighting all day, and the British attack broke. And Arnold saved the day. He took a musket ball right here, right above his right hand. He was horribly wounded, but saved the day. Saratoga would be one of the most crucial battles in American history. Saratoga would change everything. Because, okay, Trenton and Princeton are huge. We could fight. But Saratoga was a huge victory over a full army. 10,000 men, not a rear guard. And Burgoyne out in the middle of nowhere, but had no choice, oh, I got Arnold, to surrender. And this proves that the U.S., these new colonies can win. And if they can win, who's watching thinking, yeah, let's get them? Who's watching? What country is watching? The French. And Burgoyne surrendered, and that would lead directly to the Franco-American alliance. The Franco-American alliance. That's a picture of Burgoyne surrendering to Gates. If you go to the rotunda of the United States Capitol, it's a massive painting that's up there. Most people think it's Washington taking the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, but it's Gates at Saratoga. And the French would go join in the next year. And with the French help, the United States could win. Remember, Washington just has to survive, but they need supplies. And that would funnel supplies to the colonies. That would be massive. And they would turn it into a world war. Now the British have to defend the Caribbean. They got to defend the Mediterranean. India, again. And I should add, the Spanish jumped in. And the Spanish jumped in this alliance too. They hate the British. The Dutch just attacked the British anyways. They don't care. Now I should add, they don't care, the French, the Spanish, or the Dutch, about the colonies. They just want to get the British. Now the British have to defend everywhere, just like the French had to back in the 7 Years' War. And now the French are going to supply money, which the colonists have none. Not a lot. I should add, the French, who are already in debt after the last war, are going to go into more debt. And that will soon lead to a revolution and beheadings. That's another story. And weapons, half of Washington's army by 1780 were French. Without French help, the United States could not have won the Revolutionary War. It would have been, let me rephrase that. It's hard to imagine them winning. Remember, they have to survive, but you need supplies. And they got the supplies. And so, we must do whatever France wants for the rest of the history of the United States, because without them, there'd be no United States. Sound about right? I would say the French, I think we're even after World War II. Moving on. That is the monument at Saratoga. And each of these have heroes of it. Like, for example, there's Gates, there's Daniel Morgan, the old wagoneer, and then they have an empty one right there. There's no statue. There's no statue. There's another monument at Bemis Heights where they rallied and turned the British back. And the only monument there is a boot. How do you recognize the hero of the Battle of Saratoga who would become a traitor? So, they have an opening for a statue, but no statue. They have a boot, but not the statue of him preventing him. Arnold would be horrifically wounded, and he felt he got no credit. Gates took all the credit. Gates wants to be overall commander. And in fact, once again, in the Continental Congress, there's John Adams saying, fire Washington. Adams was all over the place. And there's a painting, this is a painting of Arnold after he was wounded. Well, the British evacuated Philadelphia, 1778. I mean, what are they going to do with it? And so he went to Philadelphia, and he felt slighted. And this began to fester, this festering wound alongside his real wound. It took him over a year to recover. And he was going to be befriended by loyalists. In fact, he would marry the daughter of a prominent loyalist family in Philadelphia. And Arnold was not popular. And now he's even less popular. Is he really loyal? But Washington knew he fought and knew he couldn't maybe campaign like he used to, at least for another year as he recovers. This right here, the musket ball is going to be there for the rest of his life. He couldn't really do anything. Actually, fortunately, they didn't do anything. If they would have tried to gouge out that musket ball, it would have killed him for sure. And he's plotting. You can imagine what his in-laws are saying. They don't appreciate it. They didn't understand what they got. I know somebody who will. I know somebody who cares. And he began to intrigue secretly with the British in Philadelphia. Then Washington gave him command of one of the most important forts in all the colonies, West Point. West Point's on the Hudson River. It's on high bluffs. This is an engraving of it right here. And what makes it so important is the Hudson makes a really sharp turn right here. And so they put really big, thick chains. This is the chains right here. Each link is about that big, iron chain. So no boats can go past unless you take this well-fortified fort. So the British can't use the Hudson to go up and attack. It's really important to hold on to this fort. Washington put him in command of West Point, not knowing that he's already secretly intriguing with the British. And Arnold made secret plans with the British to give up West Point without a fight. Basically ordering his men to stand down. He would order some out of the camp, and it would be taken. But just days before it's going to happen, this is the marker where it happened. A continental, basically, like militia scouting on their own, stumbled across Benedict Arnold, and John Andre was a British officer he was meeting with, and captured Andre. And on Andre, they found letters with Arnold's signature. And they found out he was going to give up the fort. Literally seconds before Arnold was going to be taken prisoner, he snuck out of West Point and rode to New York. And that's why Arnold is considered the most famous traitor in American history. He was going to give up West Point at the last second, it didn't work. Arnold would spend the rest of the war, as he got better, leading loyalist cavalry quite effectively in Virginia, and would spend the rest of his life in London. Of course, once you're a traitor, of course, he would say, I wasn't really a traitor. I was always a British subject. And this is an engraving after the war of Arnold, and it's a traitor, Benedict Arnold, and Two-Face as a traitor, the devil behind him. And so, Benedict Arnold. If you're a Benedict Arnold, you're a traitor. So that's the story of him. Very quickly, let's get to the West. When I mean the West, I mean the wilds of Western New York and Western Pennsylvania. That is the West. And I didn't write this down, so add this. Most of the tribes, most of the woodland nations joined the British. They had no choice, they felt. Only the British would keep the colonists from taking their land. Yet they knew the British would come for their land anyway. So it was a terrible deal they had to make. The most important group were the Iroquois, especially the Mohawk. Joseph Brant, right here, would lead most of the Iroquois to fight the British. Here is, phonetically, we got this, the spelling. Somehow that became Joseph Brant. I don't know. I'm not even going to try and butcher his language. Remember I told you about the Mohawks? You see his head? They ripped the hair out, then he kind of braided the hair here to cover. Remember I told you Mohawks ripped this part of their hair out? I told you that story, didn't I? Yeah. And so, they fought all on the frontier of New York and Pennsylvania. In fact, 1777 was going to be known as the Bloody Year, as thousands died. But when the British were defeated at Saratoga, they pulled out their support. There weren't that many Iroquois. And eventually would become into a U.S. victory. And they would butcher the Iroquois. Just butcher. But for the future of the United States, because of this, Congress, the Continental Congress, would appoint George Rogers Clark, I'm jumping right to here, to go and claim the Ohio River and give him a claim to the west. Claim to west, I didn't put down box. Claim to the west. Clark and his group, and this, Clark had been along the frontier, talked to people who fought in the Revolution or the French and Indian War. He called this group after a French and Indian War group called the Rangers. And their plan was to march down the Ohio River, so sail and march, attacking every tribe. So this was a brutal attack, and this is them at Vincennes, a port they took right here. But the point was, he made it all the way to the Mississippi River, and that is going to give the United States a claim to all of this area in the treaty negotiation. So when they did meet for the treaty, the British had decided, okay, we're done. It's not worth it anymore. That give the U.S. a claim to the Mississippi, and that would be huge. And two things about this. First off, you might have heard of Rangers. So in World War II, the British made these forces that would be specially trained to hit behind enemy lines, do these raids. And they named them after this Boer group in South Africa called the Commandos. The U.S. didn't call them Commandos. We named our group, started training them after George Rogers Clark. They're called Rangers. And that came from George Rogers Clark. Some of you might know who the Rangers are. And most of you probably know George Rogers Clark, more famous brother. Who? I heard some people whispering it. Okay, I'm glad no one said, you mean Lewis Clark? Yeah. The core discovery. Lewis and Clark. William Clark was George Rogers Clark's younger brother. Yeah. Did anyone want to blow it out? You mean Lewis Clark? William Clark. I know, I get it. All right. So that turns into, let's go to the next one, the Southern Strategy. So we're going to not cover a lot about the next couple years. But 1779, the British decided, all right, we're not fighting a different war. So we're going to keep New York City, hold our main forces there, which Washington is going to have to be basically up near, basically Connecticut to keep an eye on New York City. There are more loyalists in the South. So let's go down to the South, pacify, meaning get rid of the Patriots, and take the South, so at least we hold the big tobacco plantations. So take this and hold this. So this is more of an idea. All right, we might not be able to hold this, but we'll get this. Now, the reason there are more loyalists in the South, to their point of view, is not because they're loyal, like they thought. They're loyal. No, it's because there have been no armies rampaging across the South. The war was up in the north. It was distant. It really wasn't part of them. Gee, I wonder if minds will change if all of a sudden 10,000 British soldiers are rampaging through the South, taking food and burning homes down. So, 1780, they took Charleston, 1779, they took Savannah, then they took Charleston. And I should add, it says Charlestown, named after King Charles. Today that is Charleston. The United States would change the name of that city so we're not King Charles's town. And this was a disaster. American forces there surrendered without firing a shot. They got bottled up under Benjamin Lincoln. I mean, it was just a disaster. But now what? The British are here. Oh, this easy to follow map is the West Point map. I forgot to talk about West Point. What is West Point today? Someone said what? Yeah, it's the United States Military Academy. So copying the French, the United States would make their, for the Army, their military academy is there. Anybody know where the Navy's military academy is? Their Navy's, the Naval Academy is, I'm sorry. West Point's Army, the Navy's the Navy Marines. They're in Annapolis, Virginia. And then the Air Force, which was created in 1947. Anybody know what their academy is? Colorado Springs. Which if you didn't know is in Colorado. Finish this tomorrow. That's me Wednesday. I didn't quite finish. I could do the test, but that's great.
It says it's on.
All I
Can
need to
it
do
be
is
on
erase
Thursday?
it can't be Wednesday.
Next semester.
That's so I will have to draw you one more battle. Thank you for coming. Good.
I'm gonna inspire one.
Goodbye, everyone. Leave my presence.
Okay, I gotta get.
I can tell. Everyone misses. I mean, it's so tough to be away. No. I'm behind. So we gotta get going.
I'm behind, but I'm also not behind. No, please don't. Alice, I will. Okay, I won't. Hi, Myra.